So, another day, another Boeing humiliation. And it just feels like it's been like this since that door plug blowout incident back in January. But this time, it has to do with the company's spaceflight division, not its planes. Right? Because as you may have seen, back in June, Boeing conducted its first ever crewed test flight of the Starliner space capsule, with it carrying two NASA astronauts, 58-year-old Sonny Williams and 61-year-old Butch Wilmore. But, and this should come as no surprise to anyone who watches this show, Starliner's been plagued by technical issues throughout its development process. Things like its faulty software, flammable tape, stuck valves, and weak parachute system. In this test flight, it was no exception, with the capsule leaking helium even before liftoff, though that didn't stop the launch. And then, before it docked with the International Space Station, several thrusters malfunctioned. Right, so Butch and Sonny climb into the ISS, I can imagine, only after saying a few Hail Marys for what was supposed to be an 8-day trip. But 2.5 months later, engineers back home still couldn't figure out with certainty what went wrong and whether it would happen again. Right, and so over the weekend, on Saturday, NASA announced that the uncertainty and lack of expert concurrence does not meet the agency's safety and performance requirements for human spaceflight, meaning Starliner will return home early next month without anyone on board, leaving Butch and Sonny effectively stranded on the ISS, though NASA won't use that word. Their agency administrator, Bill Nelson, saying,
"Spaceflight is risky, even at its safest, and even at its most routine. And a test flight by nature is neither safe nor routine."
Now, all of this alone, that would be humiliating for Boeing. But what really rubs salt in the wound is who's going to be rescuing the astronauts instead.
NASA announcing Saturday they will return home using SpaceX Crew 9 Dragon capsule instead of Boeing's Starliner.
Right, Boeing's arch nemesis is going to swoop in to do what Boeing couldn't. Hey, y'all, if you are not aware, this rivalry is deep. I mean, it goes back to 2014, in fact, because that's back when NASA selected both companies to develop spacecraft to ferry astronauts to and from the ISS, with the agency doling out $4.2 billion to Boeing and $2.6 billion to SpaceX. And while SpaceX has already done 9 crewed flights for NASA as well as commercial missions, Boeing's still trying to get certified, and it's already $1.6 billion over budget. And so what we're looking at with this latest failure is a huge setback, because if NASA requires another crewed test flight, that's going to cost at least hundreds of millions of dollars more. All of which is why you have one anonymous Boeing staffer telling the New York Post, "We have had so many embarrassments lately. We're under a microscope. This just made it like 100 times worse. We hate SpaceX. We talk shit about them all the time, and now they're bailing us out." Though to be fair, NASA avoided casting any shade on Boeing, which also reportedly tried to convince the agency that Starliner was safe enough to bring the astronauts back, with NASA's commercial crew program manager Steve Stitch minimizing the backroom conflict.
There was just a little disagreement in terms of the level of risk. We did it a little differently with our crew than Boeing did.
But with all that said, as far as the SpaceX mission, it's scheduled to happen September 24th, with them reportedly ditching 2 of the normal 4-person crew to make room for Butch and Sonny, who will come back in February, which means that best case scenario is that they're going to spend at least 8 months on the ISS in total, which is of course far more than the 8 days they expected. So in the meantime, they'll be doing scientific work, space maintenance, and possibly some spacewalk, which, depending on your point of view, could be a great cool gig for stranded astronauts or shitty.